Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show. Let's see, we started today with authors in Indiana, South Carolina, Seoul, South Korea. Now we're going all the way to the other end of the world to an author from a very exotic place. Let's welcome David B Roundsley. Where are you, David?
I'm in Benicia, California.
That's somewhere in the Bay Area?
Yes, it's out by Vallejo.
Oh, by
East Bay.
Vallejo, yeah. And
Yes.
now you started your life in L.A.,
Actually, Southern California.
Southern California.
Garden Grove, to be specific.
By the way, before we go too far, because I got a million questions for David, but here's the cover of his book that is coming out or came out. We'll ask him about that in a minute. But started by saying you started out in Southern California, but you started out being adopted. Is that right?
That is correct. And that's actually the subject of my first book,
Right.
Bad Blood, A Life Without Consequence, which is radically different from the HOA.
Definitely. I got stuck. I went to Amazon. I put your name in. I got stuck reading up on Bad Blood and your life. You're adopted and moved from Southern California to Northern California at 16 years old. Was that tough?
That part wasn't, no. Everything else was, but
Everything
not
else
that
was
part.
so. But you got to read that book to find out. So, but that book looks intriguing. Tell us the title of that, so if our viewers want to go find it.
The first book is Bad Blood, A Life Without Consequence. And it's a memoir. I knew I was adopted early on. I could go down a whole rabbit hole about that. But my parents always told me I was adopted. So there was a certain amount of factual information I had, but it didn't really go anywhere. And it was a moment much later in life when I caught a talk show on adoptee reunions. And they said, your information and maybe you'll get matched, buddy. So I knew my birth parents' names. I knew the hospital I was born. Obviously, I knew the day I was born. So I entered it and was rather stunned when the phone rang 45 minutes later from Tennessee. And at first I'm like, I don't know anybody in Tennessee, but I picked it up and it turned out to be a woman who was a search angel. And she said, I know who your parents are and I know where they are. And I'm like, oh. So we had previously, when we had done our wills, we had asked the lawyer, it turns out when you're adopted, you meet other adoptees. It's sort of like dead bodies in a pond that just rises to the surface. And we had asked how much a search would cost. And this was about 10 years earlier. And he said upwards to $40,000, $50,000. And at that point, the information I had on my birth parents was that my birth mother's parents were both dead, and she was 24 when I was born, and my birth father was an orphan. So I thought, well, nobody lives long. So by this, it's past 50 years. So why would I pay that kind of money to find dead people? So this woman had a PayPal, and I said, well, how much? And she goes, 250. And I go, well, that's a whole lot better than 50,000. And then she goes, oh, you're in California. There's a surcharge. I got, here it comes. And she goes, 250. And I thought, oh, that's still better. So my husband said, yeah, give it a shot. She probably can't close. So sure enough, she got back to me in 10 minutes and had my birth mother's address and started on a 13-year journey that took me coast to coast. It was a very weird, unique journey. Never met either of my parents. My mother had died 18 months previous to my finding her, and my birth father refused to meet me and had passed before I had a chance.
Wow.
But I ended up becoming friends with 2 out of 4 of his ex-wives and met 4 half-siblings and met an amazing group of people who were all shockingly open, and I guess because I was an old man by that point, they didn't sugarcoat things and were very blunt. And but even with that information, it took 13 years to completely peel the onion.
Oh my goodness! I want to read that book too. Say the title again.
Bad Blood: A Life Without Consequence.
Bad Blood, yeah. But the book I'm dying to read, and I've only read a little bit about it, is this one, HOA, the HOA. You know, I love dark comedies, and I got a feeling this is going to be one.
Yes. Yes. Lived in a couple, actually more than a couple of homeowner associations. And I noticed by our second go round, there's a very different mindset to neighbors and residents in a homeowners association versus living in a standalone home or even an apartment. People tend to get possessive and ownership of area above and beyond their own area. They sort of, and certain personality types tend to gravitate toward homeowner boards. And HOAs, generally you say it and everybody kind of, you know, they don't have a good rap.
Yeah.
But it's really not the HOA itself that's bad, it's the people involved. And what I tried to show through the various interpersonal relationships was a good majority of people move into HOAs and it's like, don't know, don't care, life functions. But there's a small group of people that like, yeah, I want to get in there. I'm gonna run this thing. I'm gonna make it right. And that's fine until the point when it's not right.
Yeah.
And things happen, and suddenly, it's always when things happen that suddenly everybody's like, what's going on? Who are these people? Why is this happening? So I also noticed, maybe it's because of the close proximity and because of the connections in an HOA versus an apartment or a standalone home, you got to know your neighbors a whole lot more than you normally would, and discovered a lot of weirdness, quirkiness, just a lot of very, at the time were quite funny, but later on in point, extremely funny. And so trying to underscore the interpersonal relationships, the situations that arose. And not only that, but when you go to meet people, you're at a cocktail party or at a gathering, and suddenly HOAs come up, everybody starts sharing their horror
They all have a
stories.
story.
Oh my God, everybody's like, oh, wait, let me tell you. So this was gathering, picking, and then kind of, as one of my editors pointed out, it's fiction. Make it fictional. So I picked up grains, threads of things that I had heard, experienced, and extrapolated them into what I hopefully think will be an amusing, engaging, and fun story.
By the way, you've actually even pictured what some of these characters would look like. You have a picture of the people from the HOA that you sent over. Now,
I very much, what I found is a lot of people tend to say, oh, that's me. Oh, you know, and it's like, so I wanted to make it very clear that these were people that I had created from scratch, and also because I come from a multidisciplined, I'm a graphic artist, I'm a musician, I'm a video creator, so I went from the ground up, soup to nuts, and wanted to create a visual component.
Nice. By the way, tell us a little bit about the music.
The music. I've been doing this since the 80s. Really, in the 80s, I thought I could be maybe the next Thompson Twins, Pet Shop Boys, except boy, since it was just me. And I worked at it. I was happy with the songs, but it just didn't come together. Put it on hold. Ended up having a career as creative director at a few e-commerce companies. And it was interesting at the very last one, which was the most money I ever made, and it was the least happy I was in a job ever. And they had these team building exercises where they wanted people to talk about themselves other than the parameters of the job. And I said, well, I used to create music. And one of the gals said, well, why aren't you doing it now? And that just really stopped me. And I said, why am I not doing that now? And very shortly thereafter, the company went down the crapper. In fact, I'm actually writing a book about that right now called The Creative Department. Fiction. And with part of my severance package, I went out and built a whole new digital studio.
So you're ready
and
to go.
Within 4 years of doing that, I released commercially my first album under the name of Munich Syndrome, Sensual Ambience. And since then, the HOA is my 15th album. And basically this is, as I say, I do multiple disciplines. My mind doesn't really work and I'm just going to write, I'm just going to paint, I'm just going to do music. I'm always doing multiple things throughout the day. And so the HOA album is a companion piece, which I actually also did for Bad Blood. And Bad Blood is much more literal with its companion component than the HOA, but it's moods, you know, settling in, looking at the HOA, looking out the windswept hills. There's a song called Windswept, but then some of the neighbors get a little huffy when we were doing a fire break, so there's a song called Firestorm for a Fire Break. So you could listen to this while you read the book.
Now, I have another picture on the put up on the screen. It's Mittens. What's Mittens?
Mittens is a character, and I'm not going to say much about Mittens other than Mittens is scattered throughout the book, and you have to read the book to see Mittens' story.
I guess Mittens must live somewhere in the HOA or exists there somewhere in
Actually,
that realm.
Mittens lives many places in the HOA.
David, I just went, as I mentioned in the beginning, I went to Amazon, put in your name, David B Roundsley, by the way. Popped up, there's all that information, the first book, this book, how to order it. Now, this book, The HOA, is it out? Is it coming out?
It will be out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the usual places on April 4th.
Okay.
Right now, it is available directly from my publisher, Ingram Spark. There are links on my website, dbrdesign.com. And actually, you save $3 over Amazon's price if you order directly through the publisher. So,
whenever I can order directly, I like to do that. I feel like it's better for the author. And
it is. Amazon takes a shockingly large cut of the pie. I mean, I'm self-published, which I kind of learned some of the lessons because I'm self-published with the music as well. And the music industry was the canary in the coal mine for publishing because that all got devalued hideously. Yeah. And it's creeping into now books and movies and everything else. And learning what your take is, it's not a moneymaker.
Yeah. David, we went past time, but I could talk to you all day. You're a great person to interview. I really appreciate that. Any last thoughts for our viewers?
I check out the book. I think it's funny. I hope it's funny. I laughed when I reread it. I think it's enjoyable. Check out Bad Blood if you're interested in DNA searches and the possible things you find lurking under the carpet, and check out my music at munichsyndrome.com. I've got a whole lot of music from dance to down-tempo to atmospheric to ambient.
Nice. Very good. All right, David B. Roundsley, I appreciate your time. I want to talk to you again because you're a fun interview.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you for having me.
All right, we'll be back with more authors right after this.
Thank you very much.